Hello, welcome to my presentation which talks about climate change and the adaptation of Vietnam. Climate change is now affecting every country in the world. National economies and communities are disrupted by climate change not only today but even more in the future. People are experiencing the significant impacts of climate change, which include changing weather patterns, rising sea level, more extreme weather events, diseases, and so on. According to UN Climate Report, from 1880 to 2012, average global temperature increased by 0.85 Celsius. Oceans have warmed, the amount of snow and ice have diminished, and sea level has risen. Global emissions of carbon dioxide have increased by almost 50% since 1990. Vietnam lies on the tropical side global, that's why it's vulnerable to natural disasters. The Climate Risk Index for 2016 has rated Vietnam as one of the 5 countries most vulnerable to climate change and its related disasters. Therefore, climate change adaptation is vital for Vietnam and has been considered as one of the priority tasks in the government's work program. Vietnam Climate Action Report for 2015 acknowledged that over the past 50 years, the average temperature in Vietnam has increased by approximately 0.5 Celsius, and the sea level has risen by about 20 centimeters. According to the data of World Press Institute, the average number of deaths and missing people due to natural disaster is 500 annually. Annual economic losses accounted for approximately 1.5% of GDP. The most vulnerable areas and regions are agriculture, natural ecosystems, biodiversity, water resources, public health, and infrastructure, the Mekong Delta, the Red River Delta, and the Central Coast. According to Vietnam's climate change scenario, by 2100, the annual average temperature in Vietnam is expected to increase by 2 to 3 Celsius. The sea level will rise about 100 centimeters. Under this condition, up to 39% of the Mekong Delta, over 10% of the Red River Delta, and over 20% of Ho Chi Minh City will be at risk of being inundated. Now, why climate change is difficult to solve? Council actors find it difficult to develop sound strategies for responding to climate change and building public support for such strategies. The reasons stem in part from the inherent complexity of the issue. Some of this complexity relates to the physical science of climate change. Firstly, predicting future climate change requires understanding numerous linkages among different elements related to climate system. Basically, the connections in this chain are well understood, but some elements are much less so. As a result, the outcomes of actions rarely be presented as certain predictions, but in probabilistic or qualitative terms. Secondly, limiting climate change requires efforts from global scale to all levels of society. However, there are many different perspectives on how to define each country's responsibilities regarding this problem. In addition, decisions made at the individual and household level also play a significant role in driving GHG emissions, but it's not easy to encourage consciousness of the society. Thirdly, it's necessary to weigh the possible benefits and costs before making a decision, but decisions on actions to limit or adapt to climate change have characteristics that makes such analysis extremely challenging. For example, the difficulty to qualify costs and benefits, or the difference in time lags between the occurrence of costs of actions and the benefits. In objective aspect, despite great efforts and initiatives in implementing climate change adaptation activities, there still are major challenges for Vietnam because of the shortage of capacities and resources for climate change adaptation measures. Regarding policies and institutions, there are limitations in the legal framework for integrating climate change issues into national socio-economic development plans, the coordination between line ministries, sectors, and localities to address multi-sectoral and inter-regional issues, and the incentives to attract domestic and foreign investments of private sector to participate in the actions. In terms of capacity, there is shortage of specialists as well as technology in climate change and the assessment of the effectiveness of adaptation measures. As the result, the needs of forecasting, early warning, and scientific research on climate change are quite limited. Communication and awareness rising on climate change is also a significant problem. Finance is one of significant obstacles. According to a technical report of Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, while there are policies, plans, and programs on climate change adaptation efforts were designed to collect funding for implementation, state resources can only meet 30% of the adaptation needs. Although climate change is one of the most challenging issues facing Vietnam, there are favorable conditions for Vietnam to strengthen the faith in the struggle against this natural challenge. What I am mentioning here are the determination of Vietnamese government in climate change adaptation and the support of international organizations. The Vietnamese government has serious and correct understanding of the impacts of climate change as well as the need to implement solutions to address this challenge. Vietnam is one of the signatories to the Paris Climate Change Agreement in 2016 and has figured out many policies regarding this issue which have been focused on addressing investment, policy, and capacity building problems. Climate change adaptation until 2020 is reflected in a number of strategies, programs, and action plans, including resolution on proactively responding to climate change, enhancing natural resources management and environmental protection, law on natural disaster prevention and control, national climate change strategy, national program to responding to climate change, and so on. Vietnam also received valuable and effective support from international organizations in addressing climate change, such as the Japan International Cooperation Agency, the World Bank, the UNDP, and so on. Especially in 2016, Ireland provided about 3.3 million euros in climate finance to Vietnam, and the World Bank helped Vietnam with a 90 million USD credit. In conclusion, climate change is a global issue which requires the cooperation of all countries in the world to adapt to it. Vietnam and many other developing countries are struggling with climate change in the lack of resources. In this case, international cooperation is not only to help the affected countries but also to save the green planet of all of us.